Tar Heel Teachers on the Road is a travel series where I have an opportunity to connect with educators across the state of North Carolina. For this special episode of the program, I am in Greensboro for the Spring 2022 North Carolina Federal Education Program Administrators Conference. I had a wonderful chance to moderate a distinguished panel of federal program administrators. Federal program administrators here in our state contribute so much to our school systems, and it was a pleasure to learn more about their work. Take a look. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with our panel, and I would love for you all just to introduce yourselves, tell where you work, and really tell us how long you have been in federal programs, and we'll start with Ms. Barrett.
I'm Ginny Barrett. I am Federal Programs Director at Buncombe County Schools, and I've been in this position for about 8 years.
Hey, my name is Joe Bullis. I'm Executive Director of Federal Programs and Career and Technical Education for Wilkes County Schools, and I've been in federal programs for 16 years.
I'm Dr. Dietrich, the Executive Director of Professional Learning and Federal Programs, and I've been in federal programs 20 years.
Good morning, I'm Jason Griffin, Director of Elementary Ed and Federal Programs for Craven County Schools, and I'm the rookie of the group. This is 4 years for me.
And I'm Melissa Nixon. I'm the Senior Executive Director of Federal and Special Programs in Guilford County Schools, and I've been doing this for 8, 9, 10 years, somewhere around there. Oh, wow.
Really distinguished panel with different years of experience serving in this crucial role. And so the first question that we would like to ask you all is that what would you say is a misconception about your role as federal programs administrator that individuals in your community might have, or even some people in the school system?
For me, I think it's, they think I have purse strings, that I'm a money person, but I'm really about improving schools and what happens for our students, which we use federal money for. But it's more than just managing that part of money.
That's a great question. My brother still asks me today, what do you do and what's your title again? When he introduces me to people, he doesn't yet have a clue. So I think the misconception is certainly what was already mentioned, that we should be walking around in black suits, white shirts and black ties like MIB people, that we're coming to get you, and that if you need any extra money, federal programs is where you reach out to. But as we said, it's so much more than that. It's being able to allocate resources, not money, but resources to help the student. That's the end game.
I would agree with my colleagues that many see us as the keepers of the purse, and we're not keepers of the purse. We might hold the purse, but we're really not the ones who direct the purse, essentially. There are others above us to help us direct that purse, and so it's important to understand that we're about program development.
I can agree with all my colleagues. When it comes to federal funding, ESSER funds, we can't just go out and put AstroTurf on a football field. There are certain guidelines that we have to follow. We've got plans that we've got to put in place, and we've got to make sure that the budgets that we create align with the plans that we turn in.
And going with what Jason said too, I don't think folks know that there are all the funding sources that we work with, and that we have to blend all those together to make things happen, sort of what my other colleagues have said.
Dr. Nixon, can you keep that microphone for a second? I would love to know from your perspective, having just returned to Guilford County Schools this year after moving to the State Department, how has that really impacted your work now that you're back at the district level?
Oh my gosh, so it's been so transformative. It was, as I tell everybody, it was absolutely the best job I've ever had in my entire life. It was just great people to work with. And for me, it was coming from a very, very large district, going to see Julie in Cherokee County and going to see Ginny in Buncombe, and really seeing the different things that happen and how folks use their funds. And for us, opening our eyes in Guilford to say, oh wow, we can do these things, and helping us to open the scope and thinking about how they blend their funds, and having such respect for the jobs all these other people have more than one job. Now I have one too, but I'm focused most on federal programs. I don't have to worry about elementary education. I don't have to worry about professional development, all those big jobs. So just a different respect for the folks who are in smaller counties and understanding how much harder that can be in a very different way.
That's great. Mr. Griffin, talking about having multiple jobs, you are serving as elementary ed director for Craven County Schools in addition to being the federal programs director. And you see up close the needs of the elementary schools. How do you maintain and make sure that the middle school and the secondary schools are also receiving the funds and resources that they need?
So that's a wonderful question. So when I started this position 4 years ago, it was just elementary schools. I have 15 elementary schools that I oversee. 14 of them are Title I, and each year we've expanded. So each year in this position, I've added a middle school, so now I have 3 middle schools, 17 total Title I. And the difference, with my secondary schools is that, they're not limited to the class size requirements that we have in K-3. So we do, in our grades 4 to 5, we do classroom reduction positions, we do instructional coaches and interventionists. And then for our middle schools, we're able to have coaches at each grade level. So grades 6, 7, and 8 each have a coach or an interventionist, which has been very helpful when you talk about leveling the playing field. Putting those resources in place has been very beneficial to our middle schools.
That's good. And when you are adding those various individuals to the schools, we have to make sure that they have professional development and we're continuing to grow them. Dr. Dietrich, can you talk about that? You are the Executive Director of Professional Learning for Durham Public Schools as well. Talk about how federal programs of professional learning intersects in Durham Public Schools.
There is a natural alignment. Without federal funds, we would not be able to build the capacity of teachers as well as principals. So we're able to utilize those funds to ensure that we are building both leader and teacher effectiveness to move student achievement. So if you have Title I, you have Title II, or Title IV, you're able to be creative and innovative in how you support teachers and leaders in reaching students to ensure that they are proficient.
And that innovation is really important, and ESSER funds have allowed districts across the state to be able to redesign education and be able to try some things differently as we really make sure we're meeting the needs of our children. Let's talk about that, and we don't have to start in any particular order. In terms of how you all have been able to use your ESSER funds to really innovate within your districts.
I'll begin. I sometimes think that while we didn't want COVID, we didn't want a pandemic, it allowed us to do things totally different. One thing that happened, remember many years ago, we were talking about access. And we wanted all students to have one-to-one learning. And some school districts were doing it well. Other school districts were having 3-to-1, 5-to-1 in their schools. So ESSER has allowed us to ensure that all students, regardless of their background, have access to technology. Every student has a device in their hands. Every teacher has a device. And now we can touch and soar in the world differently prior to COVID.
Yeah, and I'm going to go along with that. Adversity and challenge creates strength, and that's where you get strong. It's when you push back against the flow. And I think COVID's really gave us an opportunity to do that. It created some unique challenges. I mean, every one of us sitting in this room, we have faced something that nobody else has faced. And I know you've heard that 100 times since COVID. But it's true and it's unique, and nobody else will be in the position that we're in right now. One of the things that I wanted to do for years, as a principal, elementary, middle, high school level, but as a Title I principal, elementary school, I never felt equipped to properly engage my parents and my families. I always, I never received any type of training, any type of professional development on that as a Title I principal. And I always struggled with that. I always felt like I shorted that community because I didn't do what I could have done to properly engage them. So one of the things that we utilize our ESSER funds with is just a parent and family engagement training model that we provided for all our Title I principals. That has been very beneficial. We actually contracted with a company, a not that I'm plugging them, do a great job, Silverton Publishing, but they came in and we did a 3-day training, upfront training with our principals on what it means to properly engage your families and what it means to properly engage your families after they have probably been disengaged because of COVID. And then through that 3-day model, follow up with that throughout the year and actually contracted for an ongoing process with that, making sure that our principals are equipped with some unique, innovative ways to bring our families in. And it's not just about, let's put a pizza on the table, call them in, and the kids get up and sing. That's very important. I don't take anything away from that. But while the parents are there and while the children are there, let's teach them to go back and reinforce what we're doing in the classroom, which is something we've all struggled, or I have, I don't know about you, but we've all struggled with that for years. And so along with that, because of ESSER funding, we were able to take some of those funds and funnel them into the schools and put them in the hands of principals. So, okay, what's your dream plan? After you've had this training, what's your dream plan? What would be the most fantastic parent events you could think of? Well, here's some funds to make that happen. And of course, they have their plan, they turn their professional development plan in, and their needs and what they're seeing in their district, and we were able to support that. And I tell you what, I know I'm talking a lot. That's because I felt really good about what we did. I feel really good about what we were doing with that funding. And if it hadn't been for ESSER, I don't think we would have reached that point.
In Buncombe, we've been really strong with SEL learning for several years, but there was a missing component, and that was the boots on the ground, the embedded PD for our teachers on how to weave SEL instruction in with academic instruction. And we were able to do that. We have hired this past year several SEL coaches, and then we will increase that number next year. And the reason it wasn't increased this year is because we couldn't find them. But just from the 5 that we have currently, it's powerful because teachers are getting that embedded PD, and then when the funds run out, their knowledge will stay there with the teachers in the classroom. So we hope it will have years of lasting impact on our students.
So when it comes to ESSER funds, there's 2 opportunities that we had that have been very beneficial in our school district. The first is, with the pandemic, we all had to go virtual on a dime. And there were students that struggled with online learning, but there were also students that benefited from online learning. So we actually took this as an opportunity and opened up what we call Craven Virtual Academy. And it's for students in grades 3 to 12. And we did that specifically because we know that, K2, we're trying to get our students to read. And then when you start to get, grades 3 to 5, you're reading to learn. So we incorporated that, and this actually helped us to get students back from the private schools, to get students back that were homeschooled, get them in a learning space to where they felt comfortable and that they could make up for the learning losses that they experienced that we had a couple of years ago. So that was one thing that's been very beneficial in our district. The second thing I wanted to talk about was summer learning. And when we had summer learning, we actually had a lot of success with it. We were able to, ESSER funds allowed us to recruit, the best of the best teachers. We were able to, and specifically in our elementary schools, when we got through with summer, we looked at our data, and all 15 of our elementary schools exceeded growth. And I'm talking, schools that have 100% free reduced lunch prior to COVID. All the way from a Title I school that might be right at the cusp of 35% free and reduced lunch. And to be able to have the funds and put the resources in place to make that happen has been very beneficial in our district.
Thanks, Jason. So coming into Guilford, there was a plan. There was a plan in place when I returned, but one of the things that was really easy to see is that the decision makers were really dedicated to making sure that there were sustainable solutions. So some of the things that we've done were to look at how do we address the learning gaps that are happening at school. Tutoring, very broad scale tutoring, and this was a different thing for principals because it was super research based. There were no more than 2 to 3 students in a group, and if teachers and principals didn't want to follow those guidelines, they had to use other funds to do this. So our tutoring departments know this is small group, this isn't tutoring, so that's having an impact. Like Ginny said, the social emotional, really focusing on social emotional needs of the students with their mental health. One of the things that I thought was super innovative was the access, and this was something that we discussed before COVID, but the lack of access that some students had to the CCP and the community college program. We have buses that we bought for each of the high schools to transport students who don't have transportation from their home school to the community college here in Greensboro. We also tried to build collections, our library media collections, because some of them have an average age of 1980. So investing in that. Of course, HVAC, if you know anything about Guilford, our buildings are crumbling. So that was a very welcome change. And then trying to invest in our staff. We have worked on some partnerships with universities I'm sure you all are experiencing the Great Resignation, so not having people in our high needs areas like math, science, especially at the high school level. So how can we partner with our universities to have teachers come into the program and commit to stay at Guilford?
That's great. So much innovation happening in every corner of our state. And Dr. Nixon, you did mention this around sustainability, and I would love for us to talk about that in terms of what conversations are you all having as you implement these innovative programs in terms of sustainability, making sure these programs are going to have great outcomes for students. How do we make certain that we can continue to do them beyond the ESSER cliff?
Yeah, that's the exact word I was going to use, Marlow, was the cliff. In every conversation that we have, we are trying to prepare folks for the funding cliff that's going to happen. For us, 171 and 181 is $281 million. That's a huge cliff that's getting ready to happen. So making folks understand that we can't continue to put our programs into this money without having some solution in 2 years. It's not an easy conversation with them at all.
You know, one of the things that we're doing is you know, of course, you know, how do you continue what you've begun? But it's the way you think. It's your mindset, and if you establish mindsets and a way of thinking now, you don't necessarily have to fund that momentum. You don't have to fund that culture that's created. So we're doing great things now. We're doing innovative things. We're making changes because we were forced to. But those changes, those innovations, and that way of thinking can continue on as long as you're determined to do that. As long as you're determined to, you know, and I know it's a cliche, we're going to do what's best for students first. Whatever we have to do with whatever we've got, that's what we want to do.
I just think it's real important that what was mentioned is that constant telling them about the cliff so that they don't, you know, when it comes, they don't just totally fall off the cliff. Even though there will be, I think we have to realize that there will be a cliff. Maybe it's going to be a bank instead of a cliff that we're going to fall off of. But also just, as I mentioned, that using those cell coaches, we're imparting PD into our staff to build their capacity.
Building that capacity is so key. Can you all talk about, even before ESSER funds, just with other federal funds, and how do you all really make sure that principals know how to use those funds wisely and really making sure we're going to have those strong outcomes?
It actually begins with the allotment process. And so in the individual allotment meetings with principals, we begin to talk with principals about their total funding, their local funding, their state funds, and then their federal funds. We look at federal funds as the icing on the cake. And so what would you do if you didn't have federal? How do you make your resources work? And so it's important, even though we have ESSER, and I wanted to add, you have to be strategic in everything you do. And so, for example, you have to tell people if you're gonna hire them with ESSER funds, the contract's only 2 years. You have to say it. You have to be transparent. We also have to do things that work in ways to ensure that what you're funding will have impact now, and that the district is able to support it later. And so we have to be strategic in how we use our funds. But with Title I, with Title II, with Title IV, with Title III, all our entitlement programs, we have to make sure that principals understand how those programs help support student learning as well as teaching and learning.
One of the things that we do in our district that's been very beneficial is we have Title I meetings at least once a month. And we know principals are super busy with so many things going on with the day-to-day operations. So we, we schedule it 2 times. So we'll do like a 10:30 to 11:30 and a 1:30 to 2:30. But every time during those monthly meetings, we go over budgets. And they are basically provided, their checkbook balance. This is how much you have left. This is your parent family engagement fund. This is how much you have left. Let's have the conversation about, what are some ways that you can utilize these funds that are currently aligned to your plan and NC STAR. And by having those conversations, we're able to, address, things like carryover, instead of waiting until, April or May to try to figure out how to spend these funds. We've got a process in place that we can continuously monitor this over time.
I agree also with what Jason said there, the training, the ongoing training. As you all know, the Title I schools, 80 Title I schools in Guilford. So most of those are schools where beginning principals are. So unfortunately, it's a constant having to train folks and make sure they understand you can't do anything with these funds. So Marissa Benton Brown, the Title I director in Guilford, has her team, and they have a training that we are consistent with, so that everybody's hearing the same information all the time. And then we really have a motto that we're relentlessly devoted to service and to serve our principals, because their job is 100 times harder than what ours is every day. So, and making sure we understand, their supervisors understand how the money can be used, and they're not telling them, oh, you can do this and you can supplant this position. Those are things that happen. But I would say the biggest transition we're making lately is helping folks to understand the use of their funds has to be tied to their school improvement strategies and in their plan. We're a district-wide NC STAR, so helping folks to understand that if you're the crosswalk with, what is that called, MTSS crosswalk, and working with the FAMS to identify things, and then helping them understand those funds need to be directly related to those goals and supporting them.
So we do that too. A couple of things we'd like to add. We have our monthly meetings. We do a Title I principal notebook that we update and train from constantly. But one of the things we do, it's benefits of being in the same system for a while, is establish a level of trust with some of those principals who have been there and have been trained, and know probably just as much as federal programs as I do. Is we establish some mentors. Some of those new principals that come on board, we will sign them up with an experienced Title I principal as a mentor. So that's somebody, if they can't reach me or someone in my office, they go to that principal first. That principal can give them more relevant information with what they're dealing with at that time, and just be another resource to them.
My thing is I always bring principals back to that needs assessment that they'll start doing now, and we'll take them, through about June, July, the needs assessment. And then from there, creating your Title I priority plan that is directly aligned to their NC STAR plan. All year long, I'll get phone calls and they'll say, hey, Jim, I want to do this with my Title I funds. And I'll say, is it in your needs assessment? What data are you using to determine that you need to do that? And have you made an amendment to your NC STAR plan? Which indicators are going to be on? But just trying to keep them, everything aligned, so that you can be successful and affect those children at the end of the day.
What would you add, Dr.?
In addition to meeting with principals monthly, as well as reviewing their continuous school improvement planning, our plans, one of the things we do is we actually meet with school treasurers monthly. It is important to meet with school treasurers. The school treasurers are the ones who don't often change from one school to the next. Principals move on, but school treasurers are the bookkeepers, and they understand what needs to happen. So we actually review the budget process day in and day out with our school school treasurers to ensure they understand how the funds work.
Great. As federal program administrators retire, what attributes should superintendents look for when they really want to make sure they have a strong administrator serving in this crucial role?
Well, that's another great question. I think as a superintendent looking for a federal programs director, there needs to be some experience there as a Title I principal, a building level administrator. I know people can move into the central office without having that. I'm not saying they can't do a great job and be very successful. But for me, I think that's a foundation that needs to be. Then you need to be in the buildings and deal with some of the stuff that you're going to be asking the principals to deal with. So, you can learn federal programs. Of course, with Esther, I've learned more in the last 3 years. I wish I remember everything I forgot. But anyway, you can train that, but to have that experience and to know what it's like to do those budget reconciliations, to talk to that bookkeeper, to make sure you're staying in compliance, to establish that NC STAR plan, to make sure that what you're doing supports the strategic plan. That experience is very important to me. If I'm a superintendent looking for a federal programs director.
I would echo the same thing in terms of being a building administrator, but I think too, especially with ESSER funding, is you have to be familiar with all departments. And not so much to where you're the expert, but to where, you kind of understand, that, the things that, maintenance of facilities, the things that they need, that currently aligns with our current ESSER plans. And not only that, but just making sure that, when the superintendent looks to, hire you in this position, that you have processes in place to be able to work with your finance department, maintenance and facilities, school and nutrition, because we, in this position, we touch all departments. So you've got to be able to figure out how you can manage that and have processes in place that work.
And I would also say it's simple, something that seems very simple, but I don't know what financial systems everybody has. We have LBAS and AS400 that runs a month at least behind everything. So knowing how to use Excel is critical to doing my job every single day. I'd also say somebody needs to be able to do research, and I'll look over here at Alex Charles because the answer is always, can you show me that in writing? So having somebody who's willing to do the work and put that time in to find it in writing.
I guess someone's speaking to us, isn't it? One of us is going to retire. Just wanted to make humor of that. But I do believe that one has to be a shared visionary, one has to be collaborative, and one has to understand systems. All of this, what we do, is all about connections, and it's really transactional. And so it's important that you can dialogue with stakeholders, from the superintendent to really the custodian in any building, because you want to be able to make connections. It's about relationships.
I was lucky when I came into this position. I was a Title I reading specialist for about 12 years, so I've lived in the land of federal law and practically my whole career. But to me, one of the most important things, besides what a typical principal characteristics they need, is that a champion for those underprivileged children. I'm looking forward to when ESSER goes away and we're back just doing my regular job, I was on Title I and ESL. But being a champion for the underprivileged children, because there is a lot of law. If you haven't been there, you gotta read, you gotta know, and that passion will drive them to do the very best job they can.
As you're thinking about navigating the world of ESSER, how would you all say that, and it's wonderful that we have access to additional funds, it's always a great thing. How has that really complicated your work day to day?
Well, just an example for myself is I went from managing $10 million to managing $100 million, and all that involves. It is complicated. Just the hours in the day did not increase. So it's gathering good people around you is the most important thing.
with that one. Before ESSER, if you guys will remember this, you pulled up CCIP, and maybe had 3 or 4 applications, 4. Now look at it, I used to not have to use readers with the CCIP, and over the last 3 or 4 years, I get, 1.5, 1.75, 2.0 readers, 3.0 readers. That's where I'm heading. But I like that it's pulling good people together to work with you, because it is, I don't know, maybe it can happen, but it's not a one-person job. It has got to be a team job to manage these funds, whether they're within your department or, as Jason said earlier, coordinating and working with other departments in the building. It's a team effort, and that everybody's got to have that mindset where, this is a lot. The only way we're going to do this and do what's best for the kids and to utilize these resources as best we can is that we approach it in a team atmosphere.
I agree. I would be remiss if I didn't thank my team. I have a great team. We're a team of 4, and so it's awesome to be able to distribute the work. I handle most of the ESSER work in the district, and so while I'm handling ESSER, my other team members are working on Title I, Title II, Title IV, and other responsibilities such as family engagement. And so it's good to be able to distribute the leadership, and I'm happy that with the State Department, we have a relationship, and I love in CCIP that we can do edits, and it's revisions, and it's not convoluted. It's a simple process, and it's easy for us to navigate. And so while we might have many more applications and processes to endure, it's easier for us to navigate to make it easy. So I'm just happy that when we send up an amendment, it's reviewed quickly, we get the feedback, and we can move forward. And so I will applaud our state leaders for that, and I think we should, because they have made it, while it's complex, it is simple in being able to address our needs.
I can agree with all the challenges that my colleagues have mentioned, but with challenges come opportunity. And this has been an opportunity for me to learn about HVAC systems and the different things that we can do in our schools to fix air quality. Learning about school nutrition and how much time it's taking them to prepare meals. So for me, it's been a huge learning curve. But it's also helped me not to work so much in a silo. I'm a department of 1. So I'm able to, I've been able to, build closer relationships with my colleagues and put processes in place that, allow us, to, be able to collaborate and ensure that, the things that we are doing are, in the best needs of our students.
Like Ginny said, the sheer management of it, going from a budget that was less than 100 million to nearly $500 million is a lot for anybody. When Julie and I presented yesterday, there's 31 PRCs right now that are with ESSER. It's just a lot. And helping folks to know when sometimes district folk think ESSER, and we're in our world, that's not just 171 and 181. That starts at 163 and goes through what in the world, helping them understand what in the world's a missing child grant. What are we doing with this money? And then connecting with all of the right people, like people to do the grants, like that are specialized. Like Jason was saying, having connections, and that just takes time. And being able to manage that within the time frame that these poor people get the information from the legislators, have to put it in CCIP, get it to us, and us turn it around. Making sure that you've got systems in place to do that.
So as you think about your role in the work that you're doing, do you want to drink it? You might have some more comments. Really great panel. As you all think about your role as federal programs administrator, what do you know now that you wish you would have known in year 1?
Tell you the first thing that popped into my mind when I first, and I think I was telling you earlier when I first started, it was basically a 1-page Microsoft Word document, and we filled it out and turned it in, and that was Title I, and that was about the way I did it. I mean, it's simple, but that's the way I remember it. But I wish, when I was a new director, I understood and appreciated and valued this team over here, DPI, and the regional consultants. I did not reach out to them the way I should have as a new director, and didn't utilize them like I should have. And I thought, well, you know, old school thinking, but if I ask for help, or if I call too many times, it's going to be seen as a weakness, and they want to boot me out of here and find somebody else that can do it without asking for help. And I wish that I had understood the value of that. And so I appreciate I see a lot of faces that were around when I was first beginning, and how many times I've asked them questions and got answers and reached out to them. And I really appreciate that. I just wish I'd been in a whole lot sooner.
So I would agree, knowing as a new director, the great supports that the Department of Public Instruction has, put in place, in terms of the finance department has been wonderful, and, the pre-recorded, the webinars and all the resources they provided have been very helpful. But one thing that I've learned along the way is the folks that are beside me doing this work every day in our regions. Shout out to the Southeast region. We work in the Sand Hills, we work very closely together in terms of, working on our applications, sharing ideas. And now that I know that 4 years later, not only have I learned a lot from each of them, but, I've built friendships with these individuals, and that, know about their personal lives, and, I've been able to make, connections with them just beyond federal programs. So I'm very grateful for the networking that we've been able to do between our regions.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. What I wish I knew is that the folks at this table, that table over there, they are not out to get you. I remember being a new director thinking, oh God, Alex Charles has called me, what's wrong, what have we done? And that wasn't the case at all. And that is one of my takeaways too from DPI, is these folks are dedicated to service just like we are. So they're here to help us and want us to do things well. So pick up that phone and put their number on speed dial, they're there. And then this is one of my favorite times of the year because I get to be with people who understand the job that I do. So you don't realize how isolated this job can be, sitting in a silo, because somebody said that, nobody really gets what we do. Nobody can say, what do you do? Oh, Nixon, she's the purse strings. But what is it that we really do? And it's all the stuff that my friends and I talk about. So.
I was actually reflecting on what I would say in response to this question, and I believe that my answer is, how would one think that you would become an authoritative figure, that you would become the authority on federal programs in the district? That every time there's a federal question around Title I, Title II, whatever title it is, they're gonna call you for the response. And so you become the authority in your district. And so if someone would have told me that when I first began this role, I would like, really? Because I thought everyone was inclusive, that everyone would work together. And we all work together, but when one or two people become the authority, that speaks volumes. So you are in a position of influence, and you really don't think about it until you are asked questions like that. So you are in a position of influence and authority.
I think with myself, I don't have to know all the answers at first. You don't have to know just because you are approved by the board to be federal programs director. The next Friday morning, you don't have all the answers. You're just in that job. But then to reiterate what everyone else has said is that team over there is there to support you. They are not there to get you. So thanks, Alex, for all your help.
In this complicated role that the general public or even family members don't quite understand, what's your favorite part of the work that you do each and every day?
For me, I think it is working with multiple schools and learning the dynamics, because you think when you come up, you teach in one school. I did for like 12 or 13 years. Then I became a district literacy coach. So I got to know a lot of different schools. And then you go back and you're a principal, and then you just know your school. but getting to work with other schools, and also offering, suggestions, you know, your first suggestion might not work for this school, but school D it might work for. So just, being, involved in the different, school improvement efforts across the district.
For me, I enjoy so much finding a way to say yes. If somebody has something in their plan, or they want to put in their plan, or they want a program, or they want to do something that they see a challenge, and they come to me and say, can we do this? Can this fit? I love finding that yes. And for me, that's so rewarding. And then beyond that is once I found that yes, I get to go into the building and see that yes happening in real life with real kids. That's what I love. That's what I love.
Ensuring students have what they need. That's why we do it. Making sure that students have what they need to be successful.
Just being able to be in this position and touch all departments, knowing that, you know, you can increase your school nutrition staff and you're able to provide more meals to students, how you're able to add temporary custodians and, you know, improve the quality and maintenance and the cleanliness of your buildings, being able to, you know, work with maintenance and facilities and learn about HVAC and air quality. So being in a position to where you can touch all departments has been some of the best work we've been able to do.
Like Joe said, being able to be the person who helps do the creative thinking and the problem solving, to be able to say yes, to be the hub of the money, and helping folks to understand the different ways that they can use it to make things better for all the children.
So much great stuff. Please give this panel a round of applause. We really want to. You all shared so many great nuggets, and again, the work that you do is so fundamental to our district, so we cannot forget that. If you all weren't doing this work, so many things would not happen in our school systems. So as we wrap up this conversation, before our panel departs, we would love to get some questions from the audience. So if you have some questions from the panel, I'm going to yield my microphone to you so that you can address the panel, this esteemed panel. Don't all worship here at the same time. Yes.
This, I think, is directly related to, I think, Craven County. You mentioned that when you started your position, it was just elementary schools that received Title I funds, and over the years, y'all added some middle, and did you say high school? Not high school, middle school. So how did you, we're getting ready to do that next year in my district, adding a middle and a high school, but how did you prepare those elementary schools? Because you don't get more money because you're adding more schools, and, you know, I'm a huge believer in early intervention. So how did you prepare those elementary schools that their money is going to be stretched a little bit further to add on additional schools? Not to say they don't need help. I know our middle schools need help. I'm just struggling with helping my elementary principals, you know, with that transition for next year.
So it's definitely not an easy task, because anytime you tell somebody that, you know, they're going to get less money, you know, they stop answering your texts and phone calls for a little bit. But on a serious note, it takes a lot of planning on the front end and figuring out how you can still allocate the resources for your elementary schools while also providing the same amount of resources and support that you do for your secondary schools. You know, we could have went in, you know, full-fledged and just, you know, added all our middle schools, but we were very strategic in just adding one at a time so that we could, you know, get this school set up and going, get them trained so they understand processes, and then we were able to replicate that to add 2 more middle schools.
Thank you.
That was a great question from April. Another question.
May I add?
Yes, sir, you can.
You may also want to consider how you do your set-asides. And remember what you put at the district and how you, whatever you put at the district set aside and put at the school. So that's important. So you could redirect funds at the district to support schools.
All right, please share how marginalized students and subgroups have benefited from ESSER funds and rating of those funds in your district.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, that all comes out through the comprehensive needs assessment in addition to the strategic plan and each school's NC STAR plan. But to make sure when you're making those plans to benefit the school is to look at the data and how does that need to be adjusted? How does that need to be scaffolded for this particular subgroup, whether it be EL, EC, or whatever. And it's just making sure that, yeah, they're going to be included in that, but what do they need specifically is going to help them be more engaged. And it's always keeping that in mind as you're looking, and it's one of the things, going back to one of the things I really enjoyed about the ESSER funding is the parent and family engagement. One of the things that we did is as we looked at this training, I pulled my cultural liaison in and made her a part of each of those trainings, and how is that going to fit the different communities that's represented, the different languages that's represented, how are we going to bring them in and engage them as well.
I go back to how we planned for this money. We had a steering committee, and the steering committee was made up of people that were assigned to subgroups, and the subgroups went along with in your grant application, the different places where you put money, and I was steering the vulnerable population one, and so we invited a slew of stakeholders. We had a meeting, and they were directly involved in teachers, parents, students, community members, in deciding what we need to do to address the needs of our vulnerable population. It was very effective.
And Lillian, we also invested in interpreters and used 173 to have a social worker that was dedicated to EC pre-K and to our EL families because we think their gap is probably larger than just the communication, just the achievement. But there's probably also an access gap with making sure that they have the connections to the other resources they need.
We have time for one more question, and I think we have a very special person who's going to ask the question. You may recognize this one.
First and foremost, I want to express my sincere gratitude to each of you. You are looking at some of the best in the game. Thank you for what you do for students. The question that I have for you is a two-parter. So the first part is, what additional supports do you need? If you could wave your magic wand and get anything that you need from us at the state level, what would it be? And then the second part is, it's very selfish, but we will be bringing on a new cohort of federal programs directors, people that are following in your footsteps. That will happen in July. So as we put together that training, what is the most salient thing that we can share with them to help them get started in their role?
Of course, you have to grab your microphone. No, and thinking of something really funny to say, I forgot the first part of the question. You know, and it's being facetious, but time is what we need, you know. But there's no way of doing that. And I don't know, because I really feel like I'm getting everything that I need that could possibly, because we have understanding, we have empathy, we have communication, we have connection, and those things are so important, and that's what you need. You know, I just wish there was more hours in the day. I didn't have to sleep or didn't have to eat if I could get this job done. But the second thing is it's so important. I think I said this last year. And we've already said that, is the new federal programs director is getting them in, getting them involved, and I'm giving them the opportunity to make connections with their colleagues, to getting them to understand, you know, I know Melissa, I know Alex, you know, I know Tina, and I know those names that have been there, I know Frida, and having that relationship is so important. I know I can pick up the phone call and call 3 or 4 people if I need it now, and like I said earlier, I wish I knew that sooner. I wish I knew that as new federal programs director. But once again, the value of networking with your colleagues and the value of being connected and plugged into what's going on at the state level.
Of course, I think with the ESSER funding, it's just, if it could be extended another year. I just think it's ridiculous that our lawmakers think that we address the learning loss that occurred last school year in basically in 3 years or 2 years. As far, probably have some really strong opinions about the new directors meeting, and I don't know why. I mean, maybe it was trauma back 8 years ago. But my first recommendation would be in that training, and this is not supposed to be negative, but you could ask, slow it down. Give me more days and slow it down. Go over one section and then give me time to process that in small groups and process it with maybe individual people from DPI. And then move on to the next thing. Because if that funnel in your brain that you have gets clogged up really quick in the new director's training. And so just slow down.
I'm going to answer the latter part of the question first, and that would be create a mentor system. As you create a mentor system, think about how we as experienced directors can help plan a new Directors Institute with the department. I believe that we could add value to that to ensure that we are slowing things down in a way that we have a year-at-a-glance calendar that says these are the things that you should be doing that will help. And one of the things that happens with anyone, if you're not a systems processor, if you're not an organizer, you have to learn how to become that quickly. And so you can't procrastinate in this work. You have to be ahead of deadlines, and you have to foreshadow. And a lot of times you're foreshadowing within your district. So it's just important that we create a mentor system, and then as we're planning institutes, that we involve experienced people around the table. The additional supports is, I want to thank you. I have to say thank you. I was one who kept saying, the budget needs to align with CCIP. We have to make that happen, right? And that happened. So I'm happy, so I need to applaud you all. It happened. The other thing that I would love to see happen as it relates to our management system is that just like with ESSER, Title I could happen where it's editable and you're given feedback and you can be able to make those revisions real time. I know the money can't be, I remember when the money used to be real time. I don't know if we ever go back to the money being real time, but there was a time when it was real time. I know, I see you shaking. I know why. But the reality is we used to have real time. And so the more we can make it appear and seem real time in our work, the easier it is for us. And so I believe we're on our way, but that would be one addition I would say. As we look at the management system that we're able to, for example, when we copy over, we can copy over the plan because they don't change that much because although we meet with stakeholders and we get new ideas and input, we can tweak those changes to make that side of our lives easier.
And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna start with the second part of the question. And we've had a lot of conversations after sessions about the mentoring piece and just how we see in our schools how beneficial that is for teachers to be able to have a mentor literally in your building if you have mentors within your region. We do see a lot of benefit in that. And just to kind of add to my colleague here about CCIP, I would really like to see our PRCs lumped into specific categories. So like CTE can see all their stuff in one section. EC can see all their stuff in one section. School nutrition. Because now, as we've all gotten better at this, DPI, you've got, all your team in place to be able to, now we can, see those in the different categories. I think that would be very beneficial. And in terms of the additional supports, I'm not sure I would say additional supports, but continued support. Dr. Townsley, you've done a wonderful job in terms of putting your team in place, and I've been able to see this, through since we started. And through ESSER and being able to have a team in place, it makes the world a difference. So I just want to just ask for continued support not so much as the additional supports.
And having the luxury of having the curtain pulled back, I would say too, first, thank you all for the consistency with the weekly updates. That has been, but also make sure, I remember sitting at the table with Tina and I being the ones who have been in the district, and the feedback that the team had, oh wow, we didn't know that's how it worked on that side. Making sure to have those intentional conversations with folks, bringing folks on this side of the table to the table consistent. And not just the COP, the folks who are actually doing the work every single day.
That's great. We want to give this wonderful panel another round of applause. And you all have such a great audience. To wrap up this conversation, if you would like to watch this episode, the special episode of Tar Heel Teachers on the Road, you can go to our website, tarheelteachers.com, or go to our social media platforms. We're on Twitter at Tar Heel Teachers and Facebook. Thank you all so much. We appreciate the work that you all are doing in every single county in our state. Your work is phenomenal, it is fundamental, it is essential, and we thank you for what you do. You all enjoy the rest of your conference, and I appreciate this time that I've had with you. We want to thank you so much for watching this special episode of Tar Heel Teachers on the Road. We'll see you real soon.